This is Alien Earth Season 1 in a nutshell. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to finnfilms. Alien Earth, in my opinion, was low-key one of the best shows, I think, that dropped this entire year. Today we are going to be speedrunning everything that happened in the first season of the Alien Earth series. So then, join me for Alien Earth Season 1 in a nutshell. Episode 1 of Alien Earth opens with a deep space research vessel working for the company Weyland-Yutani that has collected alien specimens and is returning to Earth. On board we see a variety of dangerous creatures, including the infamous facehuggers that become xenomorphs. On Earth we are introduced to a sick child named Marcy, who has been put in a secret new research study conducted by Boy Cavalier, the youngest trillionaire and the CEO of Prodigy Corporations, one of the corporations along with Weyland-Yutani that now controls the entire world. Cavalier hopes to create human-synthetics hybrids, essentially transferring the consciousness of humans into synthetic bodies, and he has planned to test this on terminally ill children. As we watch Marcy, accompanied by the leads of the project, the husband and wife duo, Dame Sylvia and Arthur Sylvia, lead her to a table. On the table next to her is the body of an adult woman, which will become her synthetic body, as we watch Marcy's consciousness be transferred over to the synthetics, the girl dying being reborn as Wendy, the first of a series of sick children which will be reborn as synthetic human hybrids known as the Lost Boys. As we will come to see, Boy Cavalier has a bit of an obsession with Peter Pan, his island being called Neverland and referring to the children as Lost Boys, regularly reading the novel of Peter Pan to them. Wendy, though, still has the consciousness and the memories of Marcy, making her mentally a child, yet she has the physical ability and learning capacity of a synthetic, making her essentially immortal in terms of old age, and giving her the learning capacity of a supercomputer AI, with the ability to learn and process information at an astonishing rate. Back on the research vessel, we see something horrible has happened. Somehow, the creatures on board the vessel have managed to get free. A xenomorph emerging from its egg as a facehugger, managing to find a human host, and then bursting out of its chest, growing to a full xenomorph size, hunting the crew. As the security officer cyborg Morrow makes his way to the primary control chamber in the ship, communicating with his superiors on Earth, as we watch the ship's captain bang on the door, pleading for help. Morrow using his cyborg arm to seal the door shut, as she is then horrifyingly killed by the xenomorph. Morrow telling his superiors that the ship is going to crash land on Earth, as the xenomorph begins to try to break into the room. Morrow barely managing to get on the impact room in time as the xenomorph breaks in. Back on Earth we are introduced to Wendy, aka Marcy's brother, Joe, a medic who works for Prodigy Corporation, who believes that his sister is dead. We see that Wendy has grown obsessed with watching Joe using Prodigy's many security cameras around their city of New Siam. Wendy, with her synthetic abilities, is able to tap into the security camera feeds and follow her brother, but Joe believes that his sister is dead, unaware of the secret synthetic program. We watch Joe one day as he begins to work out with his team on a rooftop, when suddenly we see the massive Weyland-Yutani research vessel come barreling uncontrollably through the skies, crash landing into the city. Joe and his team, along with the rest of the Prodigy military, are deployed to the crash site to look for survivors. Joe's team making their way and entering into the crashed ship, seeing the strange remnants of what happened on board before the crash. We then see that Morrow is still alive on the crashed ship, and is hell-bent on capturing all the alien specimens for his bosses at Yutani. Wendy, meanwhile, is undergoing a diagnostic test when she sees the footage of the crash site on the Prodigy cameras. She walks over to them using her interlinking ability with the Prodigy system to flip through the cameras, until she finds her brother Joe, as she realizes the danger that he is truly in. We see Boy Cavalier being updated about the crashed ship, as he decides that this ship and its cargo belong to him now, as he is then joined by Wendy and the synthetic Kirsch. Wendy asking Boy Cavalier to send her and the other Lost Boys to help with the rescue, Wendy wanting to do this so she can make sure that her brother Joe is safe. Cavalier agreeing to this, as to him this is a perfect field test for his prototype hybrid synthetics. We see the other Lost Boys talking and chatting about their new synthetic bodies, as despite the fact that they now have adult bodies and supercomputers for minds, they are very much still kids inside. Wendy coming in and telling them they have a serious rescue mission that they need to do, as the Lost Boys then get deployed. Meanwhile, back on the ship, we see two of the soldiers making their way through the hallways, coming to the lab room. They see several of the alien specimens still in their cage, as well as the body of a man that was shot to death. While we see a strange bug-like creature descend from the ceiling, landing on one of the shoulders, unbeknownst to him. As they leave, they are then jumped by the cyborg Morrow, who disarms them, tying them up and leaving them inside the lab. Joe, meanwhile, is investigating the med bay, where he sees the aftermath of the birth of the facehugger from one of the crew members' bodies. Joe, of course, being completely unaware of what could have caused this. Back in the lab, we see the two soldiers screaming for help when suddenly the strange bug creature crawls out of the man's shirt, climbing up his face and down his neck as it begins horrifyingly sucking all the blood out of him in an absolutely terrifying, disgusting scene. His fellow soldier meeting the same fate. We flash over to Wendy and the rest of the Lost Boys as they are headed to the crash site, Wendy telling Kirsch that she is not going to let Joe die. She is going to save him, as episode 1 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Alien Earth Episode 2 opens as Joe and his team discover a number of the bodies in the medical bay room. Several of these people died by suffocation, while one died during surgery, to remove, in Joe's words, a foreign body from his GI tract, which we later learn is a result of an alien specimen getting loose. Joe and his team continue to move through the crashed ship, as we see the xenomorph is slowly stalking them. Meanwhile, back at Neverland, we see Boy Cavalier speaking with Dame Sylvia about how the goal of the synthetic hybrid project is to expand human potential. But Dame worries about the children losing their humanity. Boy Cavalier's end goal, though, is simple, to just speak to someone smarter than him, and he believes that Wendy might be that person with some time. We flash over to Wendy and the Lost Boys heading into the ship, as Slightly, one of the other Lost Boys, asks Wendy questions. Wendy telling him that her brother is at the crash site and she wants to save him, but this is a secret that he has to keep. We watch Joe and his team push through the ship, coming out into the broken stairway of a tall building that the ship has collided with, as the group are forced to jump across to safety, Joe being the last one to cross when suddenly he hears something coming from the hole above him, as we watch a full-grown xenomorph emerge chasing after Joe. Joe jumping across, but he jumps short, falling to the level below, the xenomorph in hot pursuit as Joe manages to enter an elevator just in time to get away. In a flashback, we learn that Joe was trying to go to Mars to pursue medical school, but we learn that Wendy was responsible for Joe being denied, Wendy using her connection to the Prodigy system to manipulate it to keep Joe on Earth, as she didn't want her brother to leave. But again, we need to remember that Joe thinks that his sister Marcy, aka Wendy, is dead. Wendy and the other Lost Boys touch down on the crash site, Wendy hearing a strange chittering sound coming from the ship, as Wendy locates Joe on the security cameras as she rushes off to find him, Slightly going with her. Boy Cavalier then speaks with the CEO of Weyland-Yutani, Miss Yutani, Yutani wanting her research ship back and everything on board, but so does Cavalier. The Lost Boys with Kirsch then enter into the crashed ship, coming upon a strange alien specimen that's hanging from the center of the hallway that appears almost plant-like, as Kirsch orders Curly, Smee, and Nibs to go and find something to catch it with, as the three Lost Boys enter the lab. Here they come across another horrifying specimen, an eye creature that is taking over a cat's body, using it as a host. The creature ejecting itself from the cat's body as it lunges towards Nibs. The girl, horrified, manages to hold it off, as the three other Lost Boys trap it under a metal container. Wendy and Slightly then find Joe's backpack, as they follow the trail of the xenomorph. Joe continues to run from his life, finding one of his squad mates, who is immediately torn to pieces along with an apartment full of rich assholes by the xenomorph in an absolutely horrifying bloody scene. Joe being saved in the last minute by the cyborg Morrow, who subdues the creature with an energy weapon and then knocks Joe out. Kirsch goes and checks on the other Lost Boys in the lab, as he looks through the ship's logs. Meanwhile, Morrow is trying to flee with the captured xenomorph. He is then stopped by a group of soldiers, the xenomorph smelling their fear, escaping its bonds, killing all of them. Back in the lab, Kirsch discovers a set of strange eggs, which we know belong to the xenomorphs, as he orders Smee to go to the eggs and link up with Wendy. Wendy and Slightly manage to find Joe, Slightly letting it slip that Wendy is actually Marcy, his once-thought dead sister, but Joe is obviously skeptical and refuses to believe that this is her, as again he thinks his sister is dead. He even went to her funeral, as the synthetic hybrid project was done in secret. Joe then asks her some questions that only his sister would know. Wendy, having Marcy's memories and consciousness, is easily able to answer them, Joe accepting that this is in fact his sister, as the two hug, being reunited once again. The group push deeper into the crashed ship, finding the nest of the xenomorph eggs, Wendy again hearing a strange chittering sound, as we see the xenomorph rushing through the ship's halls, the xenomorph pouncing on Joe as he falls deep down into the ship, Wendy jumping in after him as episode 2 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Episode 3 of Alien Earth opens as Wendy pursues the xenomorph who pounced on her brother at the end of episode 2. Meanwhile, we see the rest of the Lost Boys in the ship's lab as they are securing the specimens, as we learn that the crew of the ship secured 5 previously undiscovered alien species on their mission, but the crew then lost containment, obviously everyone dying except for the cyborg Morrow. Boy Cavalier then orders the Lost Boys to change their mission from search and rescue to securing these alien species, as we see Nibs is still mentally shaken from her encounter with the horrifying eye creature last episode. Nibs asking Curly why they had to change their names to characters from Peter Pan, there being some obvious jealousy from several of the Lost Boys for Wendy. Meanwhile, Wendy manages to find Joe, who has been captured by the xenomorph being held in a meat truck, using him as bait. The xenomorph appearing, then crawling on top of the truck, Wendy stabbing it as it flips over the truck, sending Wendy flying. Joe staggers out, calling to his sister when he is suddenly stabbed in the chest by the xenomorph's tail. Just when it looks like Joe is about to be eaten, suddenly Wendy comes to the rescue, stabbing its tiny mouth. The brother and sister then attempting to lock this xenomorph behind this big door when suddenly it grabs Wendy, pulling her inside. Joe frantically attempts to open the bay door as we hear the sounds of fighting inside. The door finally opening, where to our shock we see the beheaded xenomorph lying on the ground. Somehow Wendy actually managed to kill what is considered by many to be an unkillable creature. An injured Wendy then staggering forward, bleeding from her head this white synthetic goo as she collapses on the ground. Joe, bleeding out from his own injury, also collapses on the ground next to her, passing out. Meanwhile, we see Slightly back guarding the xenomorph's eggs. He is then joined by his best buddy Smee, the two joking around and talking about the absolute insane situation they found themselves in.
Bro, can you believe you're on a spaceship?
Yeah, underground, which is a dumbass place to put a spaceship if you ask me.
I just have to say that I absolutely love these two characters and their chemistry. Like, as badass and as awesome as Wendy is, as much as I love the character of Wendy, I think that these two boys honestly might be my favorite characters. I have to say, absolutely huge props to the actors playing Smee and Slightly, as they are absolutely killing it in terms of playing like a set of like physical adults that have the mental capacity, the minds of children. I mean, it's actually startling how well they pull off this kind of dynamic, how convincing they are that they are mentally children. It's so impressive, and I absolutely love it. The two friends are then interrupted by the cyborg Morrow, who then holds them up at gunpoint, until he realizes that these two strange synths are no threat to him. He questions them, but gets little out of them besides the fact that they are unlike any other synthetic beings that he has ever encountered. Morrow then downloading the information from the ship's logs. Morrow posing a question to the two Lost Boys. Could they possibly harm or allow others to be harmed to complete a mission? The two boys saying that they could only do it if it was to protect a friend or possibly their parents, but they don't really know if they could. Morrow again is confused by this, as no other synthetic being behaves like the Lost Boys, the boys saying that they can't tell them their secret, as Morrow finishes the download, erasing it from the ship's logs, pulling a strange small circular chip from his fingertip, as a blade suddenly extends out from his hand as he threatens Slightly, asking him a question: when is a machine not a machine? He is then interrupted by the synthetic Krish, Morrow seemingly implanting this strange small circular device inside of Slightly's neck. Krish questioning Morrow, saying he must have lost a lot of friends. Morrow saying he doesn't have any friends. Slightly chirping up, saying that everyone needs friends. Morrow then fleeing, jumping down deeper in the ship, trying to escape. We see that Prodigy manages to secure the crash site, collecting the alien specimens, the xenomorph body, as well as Joe and Wendy, both in critical condition, returning to Neverland Island. The team immediately then work to save Wendy, while Boy Cavalier is ecstatic about having claimed these new alien species, as we see him walk towards the xenomorph egg, Krish stopping him, forcing him to leave the lab, as Krish explains that this creature, the xenomorph, is a parasite that burrows into organic life. So from now on, only synthetics are allowed to work in the lab with these creatures. Slightly and Smee are then questioned about what happened with the cyborg Morrow, both being somewhat shaken from the encounter. As well, we see again how the Prodigy team members treat the Lost Boys, not as people, but as machines. The boys not liking the idea that the Prodigy team can look through their eyes and record whatever they see. We then see Morrow wandering through Siam City, getting a phone and then contacting Yutani. Morrow, though, has been gone from Earth for 60 years on the research vessel, so much has changed while he was gone. The woman that he knew as Yutani has died, the company then falling to her granddaughter. As well, during his absence, Prodigy Corporation was founded, becoming one of the major companies controlling Earth. Morrow telling Yutani that these specimens have been his life's work, and that he will do anything in his power to bring them back. Back in Neverland, Boy Cavalier is approached by Curly, who asks him why Wendy is his favorite. Cavalier explaining simply that Wendy was the first. Curly saying that she wants to be his favorite and she is not like Wendy. She wants to learn and be like Cavalier, maybe even one day surpassing him. Cavalier now taking an interest in Curly, giving her some books to read and telling her to return when she's done so the two of them can play. Cavalier saying that while Curly isn't his favorite, she's now in the running, as it very much seems like they are setting up this kind of dynamic between Curly and Wendy. Morrow then contacts Slightly, speaking to him into his mind. Presumably he is able to do this because of the small circular device that he embedded in his neck. We then watch as Morrow manipulates Slightly, saying that all he wants is for him to be his friend, as Morrow views Slightly as his way to get the alien specimens back. Meanwhile, we see Wendy finally wake up, as she begins to wander the halls. Meanwhile, her brother Joe is in surgery, where the surgeons are attempting to remove one of Joe's lungs. In the lab, we see Krish and the Lost Boys begin to try to extract the face hugger from the egg. Wendy wandering the halls as she begins to have a strange reaction to the xenomorph. It's almost as if she can hear the creature in her mind, similar to what happened on the ship earlier in episode 2 when she encountered the xenomorphs in their eggs for the first time. Wendy, it seems, can almost feel the creature's pain and panic as Krish cuts open the egg, removing the face hugger, a shooting pain running through Wendy's mind. Meanwhile, in surgery, the doctors have successfully removed one of Joe's lungs. Wendy then manages to make her way into the lab, her head still in pain. Krish removing the small true parasite form of the xenomorph from the facehugger. Wendy falling on the floor, her body convulsing. As we finally see the reason why the scientists removed Joe's lung was so they could see the xenomorph parasite process in action as they released the tiny parasite into the jar holding the lung, the creature burrowing inside. The episode ending as the camera slowly fades up as Wendy writhes on the floor of the lab. Episode 4 opens with Wendy once again in recovery, the technicians having turned off her hearing trying to help her as they discuss what to do. Boy Cavalier arrives along with Joe, who is worried about his sister. Again, we see this stark contrast in how these two characters treat Wendy, as well as the other Lost Boys. Joe obviously treating his sister like a human being. Meanwhile, Cavalier treats Wendy like an AI, a machine, and very much his property. This series raising the classical philosophical question of what makes a human a human. Wendy and the other Lost Boys being a kind of real-world experiment of the philosophical quandary of the brain swap problem, which is simply this: if your brain, memories, and consciousness are swapped to a new body, is this a new person, or is it you? They run some tests on Wendy as they discover that she is the only one that can hear the xenomorph cries. Wendy wanting to be able to hear them, and to be able to communicate with them. Cavalier asking Wendy to try and speak their language to make their sounds, as she does have a supercomputer for a brain. As to our shock and even horror, Wendy begins mimicking the xenomorph chitters.
What the hell is even that?
Cavalier is advised by his right-hand man to return the specimens to Yutani, but he refuses, wanting to press onward. Also telling his right-hand man that Joe can stay here with Wendy, but he is working for them. Wendy shows Joe her bedroom as the two again try to bond in this somewhat awkward scene. Joe explaining that he is mad at Prodigy for lying to him about her death, and he wished that he could have seen her when she was in the hospital, but he was stuck in a war on the other side of the world. As we do see the two of them finally bonding together again over the movie Ice Age. Meanwhile, Slightly is having problems of his own, as he goes to a quiet spot on the island speaking with Morrow once again. Morrow continues to manipulate him, playing on the fact that he is still mentally a child, trying to frame the issue in terms of right and wrong, asking him is it morally wrong to steal from a thief, as he asks Slightly to steal one of the xenomorph eggs and return it to him. Slightly is still mistrusting of Morrow, but Morrow tells him his full name, convincing Slightly to tell him his real birth name, which is Arush Singh. A decision that will come to haunt Slightly later on in this episode. Slightly returns back to his room where the synth Krish is waiting for him. Krish knowing that something is up with Slightly, posing him a moral question of his own. Would Slightly try to stop him if he did something to hurt someone else? Slightly is about to respond when Morrow's voice rings in his head, telling him to be careful, as it seems that Morrow can hear everything that Slightly can hear. Slightly responding to Krish saying that he would stand up for his friends. Of course, we can infer by this, but by friends, in this case, he is referring to Morrow. Back in the lab, we see Krish is beginning his experiments on the other alien specimens. As we get probably the most horrifying and fucked up scene of this episode, as we watch the creepy, terrifying eye alien creature rip out this sheep's eye, crawling inside of it and then taking over its body, as we see the eye creature has a high level of intelligence and problem-solving abilities, making it in many ways almost as threatening as the xenomorphs, as imagine what damage this creature could do if it ended up taking over, I don't know, Boy Cavalier, or possibly even one of the Lost Boys, if it was even possible for this creature to take over a synth's body. But part of me wonders if it's possible from the way that this creature is looking at them, the fact that the creature attacked Nibs on the crash site, and the fact that these scenes very much seem to be foreshadowing this possibility. We then watch Dame and Arthur Sylvia go and have a private conversation, if there even is such a thing with all the cameras and monitoring here on Neverland. For context, Dame and Arthur are a couple, and the scientists overseeing the hybrid program of the Lost Boys. Arthur tries to relay his concerns about Cavalier's decisions to Dame, saying that what he is doing is not science. He isn't using the scientific method, and he isn't testing variables. He's just breaking the rules and taking unneeding risks. Arthur just wanting Dame to know that he is very much concerned about everything going on here, and that they need to think about what is going to happen if this whole program goes to hell. The two of them are then interrupted by Nibs, who tells them that she has good news, that she is pregnant.
I have good news. Such good news. I'm pregnant.
Obviously, the two scientists are alarmed by this, as it is not possible for Nibs to be pregnant because she is a synth. Dame taking Nibs to her office to speak with her. Dame attempts to try and explain to Nibs that there's no possible way that she can be pregnant, as their synthetic bodies are different, but Nibs refuses to listen to her, the girl seemingly convinced that she must be pregnant, as we know that the encounter on the crash site with the eye creature seems to have damaged her mentally in some way. Nibs growing angrier and angrier at Dame as Dame tries to push back, Nibs finally snapping, as in a flash she pounces on her, pinning her back down, as Dame tries to calm her down.
I said stop talking!
Dame being obviously increasingly panicked, as we have to remember that the Lost Boys' synthetic bodies make them incredibly strong and dangerous. You combine their physical strength with their childlike minds, and it is completely possible that any of the Lost Boys could hurt someone on accident. Dame manages to calm Nibs down, walking over and hitting a panic button as two guards come into the room. Dame having them escort Nibs back to her bedroom, telling them to contact their superiors and tell them they have a level 3 incident. Joe then goes and meets with Adam, Cavalier's second in command. Adam giving Joe an ultimatum. He can either work for them and report to them whenever they need him to. In exchange, he can stay and be around his sister. Or he can leave the island, never seeing his sister again, and then be seemingly charged for the rest of his life to pay off his new lung. Joe realizing he has no choice in the matter, and that Prodigy basically owns him at this point. Wendy then goes and meets Cavalier, Cavalier questioning her about the aliens, what she thinks about them, what she thinks they want, as well if she thinks that her brother should stay. This scene being even more revealing about Cavalier's obsession with Peter Pan and Neverland, as he compares Wendy's fight with the xenomorphs to taking on the crocodile in Peter Pan. But it goes even deeper than that. Cavalier seemingly detests adulthood and authority, seeing Joe as a symbol of that authority, an older brother or a parent. Cavalier very much wanting to make an ideal Neverland world, where he as a young person can control everything and create all the rules and break them whenever he wants. In this world of Neverland, in this metaphor in comparison to the story of Peter Pan, Cavalier is very much the Peter Pan character. Of course, the irony of this being that Cavalier will not be young forever, and that this is possibly one of the motivations in his pursuit of the hybrid program, to one day transfer his own consciousness and memories into an AI synthetic body so that he can also be a child, a young person forever. As well, in this conversation, we see Cavalier trying to turn Wendy against Joe, the two eventually making a deal. Joe would be allowed to stay as long as Wendy helps Cavalier better understand the xenomorphs. Back in the lab, we see Toodles working with Krish, Toodles wanting to take a new name, specifically Isaac after the scientist Isaac Newton. Isaac leaves, running into Slightly, who was going to the lab to try to steal the egg, slightly awkwardly trying to lie about what he was going to do, as he eventually leaves, going on a walk alone. Here he speaks with Morrow again, and he tells him that there's just no way that he could steal the egg, as it is revealed that Morrow is currently in the room with Slightly's mother. Morrow using the information about Slightly's real name, Arush Singh, to find his mother and then use her as leverage against him, as he continues to manipulate the boy. Meanwhile, we see Krish in the lab as we continue to hear this conversation between Slightly and Morrow. It's seemingly being implied in this scene that Krish is listening in on this conversation between Slightly and Morrow, Slightly agreeing to help Morrow. Morrow giving him a new task. Instead of sneaking out an egg, he's going to sneak out a person. Specifically, he will sneak a person into the lab. The xenomorph will then hatch and infect this person. Slightly will then sneak the infected person out of Neverland, giving him to Morrow. Slightly is now posed with a new moral question of which person should he use to complete this task. We switch scenes seeing the rest of the Lost Boys hanging out with Joe. Joe giving us a little history lore lesson about the world of Alien, that long ago the world was controlled by governments, but it ended up not working, and the world order fell, and was eventually replaced by the 5 corporations, Prodigy, Utani, Threshold, Dynamic, and Lint, who divided the world up amongst themselves. Slightly then joins the group, seeing Joe and being angered by this, the fact that he is here, as they all have family members they want to see, and it's not fair that Wendy gets to have Joe. Joe agreeing with them, saying that their families should be here. The Lost Boys all arguing with each other on what they should do and their relationships to their family. Wendy ultimately leaving, saying that she wants to go to the lab. We then see Slightly looking ominously at Joe. Joe later that evening looking at his surgery scar in his room. Slightly lurking outside, staring at him like a complete creeper. The connotations of this scene being that Slightly has chosen Joe to be the person to use to complete Morrow's mission, which is absolutely insane and incredibly fucked up, but this is also basically completely on brand for the Alien series. Meanwhile, Wendy is in the lab looking at Joe's lung in the container, as she begins chittering at it. Krish silently watching this interaction unbeknownst to Wendy in the background. Suddenly, though, the baby xenomorph bursts out from the lung, looking at Wendy. Wendy chittering at it as she manages to calm the creature down, slowly reaching out and petting it. It responding to Wendy almost like a mother, almost like its queen, as episode 4 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Alien Earth Episode 5 is a flashback to the events that led to the Weyland-Yutani research vessel crash landing on Earth. Events that so far in the series have only been teased, as in the other episodes we were able to kind of piece together the broad events of what actually happened in this crashed ship. The episode titled In Space No One Can Hear You, which is an homage to the famous line from the original Alien film, In Space No One Can Hear You Scream. This episode as a whole very much being an homage to the original Alien film. Episode 5 opens as Morrow the cyborg, the head of security on the ship, is being awakened early from cryosleep. Morrow being informed of an emergency situation. There was a fire and containment, as well they had 2 creatures break loose. As we learn, 2 xenomorph facehuggers have attached themselves to members of the crew, one Captain Dimsdale and the other the science officer Bromsky. The captain is dead, along with the facehugger, as the ship's surgeon attempted to remove it from the captain, killing both him and the alien. Bromsky, meanwhile, is in critical condition, while the facehugger is still attached to him, as we learn that the now acting Captain Zaveri has been hooking up with Bromsky. Morrow orders the scientist Chibuzo to go to the lab and secure the rest of the specimens, while Bromsky is put into cryostasis with the facehugger still attached to him, a decision which the crew will come to regret. One of the engineers informs Morrow that their navigation system has been fried, and the ship is currently speeding like a missile towards Earth. Morrow speculates that this scenario was caused by incompetence or sabotage, as Morrow suspects a saboteur, wanting to conduct a thorough investigation. Morrow looks through the footage of the event, seeing a person he can't identify sabotaging the navigation relay. Someone as well, we learn, deleted all of the communication files, and it will take some time in order to recover them all. Zaveri speaks with the ship's AI, known as Mother, who reiterates their mission is to prioritize the lives of the creatures over the lives of the crew, something that the new captain does not like. Meanwhile, we see Morrow reminiscing about his family back on Earth. But we need to remember that over 60 years have passed for this deep space mission, so Morrow's children will be in their 60s or 70s, even older or possibly dead, along with the rest of the friends and families for everyone else aboard the ship. Unbeknownst to the crew, during this 60-year period they've been gone, Prodigy Corporation was founded by Boy Cavalier and now controls 1/5 of the world. As Morrow and Zaveri are discussing what to do next, suddenly they get an alert of an cryopod's quarantine being breached, as they discovered a bloody hole has been torn open. The xenomorph has been born and is now roaming around free on the ship. Back in the lab, we watch Chibuzo experimenting with the tick aliens, while the creepy eye alien watches. However, she doesn't see one of the tick aliens scurrying to the top of the container, reaching out and opening it, as we watch the little bug creature scurry out, confirming that these creatures are much smarter than the people realized. The eye creature seemingly trying to warn her, but she doesn't understand as she stands up, returning the eye creature's containment vessel to the wall. Meanwhile, the tick bug creature releases its spawn into a bottle of water that Chibuzo has been drinking. Disgusting. Before Chibuzo can secure the eye creature's container, she is interrupted by the ship's medic, who sees the loose bug alien, the two of them managing to return it back to its container, but both are completely unaware that the water bottle has been contaminated, the two leaving, closing the door behind them. Meanwhile, the eye creature, being extremely intelligent, managed to knock its own container down, as it shatters, letting the creature free. The crew then gather in the mess hall together, the new captain informing them how absolutely fucked their current situation is. Meanwhile, the airheaded engineer's apprentice is chatting along, trying to eat, pouring way too much hot sauce on his meal. During this entire scene, the parasites in the bottled water are being teased, as we wonder who will be the one who ultimately drinks from it. The boy takes a bite of his food, but the hot sauce has made his throat burn, as he then frantically reaches for the water, taking a deep drink, the boy completely unaware that this water was contaminated. Moro then takes control of the situation, informing the crew that there is a saboteur on board, and that he will be conducting interrogations starting with the ship's surgeon. The man is nervous, and seemingly some kind of an addict, but it seems as though he is telling the truth. Meanwhile, the engineer and his apprentice are repairing the ship, when suddenly the boy doesn't feel well, coughing up blood, the parasites going to work inside of his body. Zaberi and Chibuzo head to the lab, where they discover that the eye creature has gotten loose, as they suddenly get a call from the surgeon telling them the situation with the engineer's apprentice, the two of them scrambling quickly to leave, locking the door behind them, rushing to the med bay. Moro continues his interviews now with Tang, the strange, weird android, I think, member of the crew. Tang revealing the answer that Moro is looking for, that just because the computer says a cryopod is full doesn't mean it is all the time, meaning that someone is pretending to be in cryosleep and has been slipping out to do the sabotage. The communication logs have finally been restored, Moro searching through them when he discovers the logs of head engineer Petrovich, who has been communicating with Boy Cavalier, Petrovich making a deal with Boy to crash land the ship in his territory so Prodigy can get the specimen and he will get paid. Moro, having discovered who is behind the sabotage, goes looking for Petrovich, but he discovers that he has already left his pod, Moro then rushing to the sickbay. The doctors scan the apprentice's body, discovering the parasites inside of him. The protocol would be to freeze the boy in cryosleep, but the doctor decides he will perform the emergency surgery. Meanwhile, we see Tang still in interrogation, as we hear the sounds of a creature in the vents above him, a very familiar drool running down his arm as he looks up, screaming, seeing the face of the xenomorph. This scene being an iconic reference and homage to one of probably the most famous and iconic scenes from the original Alien movie. The surgeon attempts to remove one of the parasites, this parasite releasing a gas-like spore contaminating everyone in the sickbay, the captain being forced to seal and gas the med bay, killing all three individuals in the room, leaving Zaveri in shock. Moro and the other security officers then search for the xenomorph but are caught off guard by Petrovich, who shoots at them, hitting the security officer as Moro grabs him, taking cover in the lab, unaware that the eye creature has gotten loose. The young man being shot in the head, as Moro manages to sneak up on Petrovich, stabbing him with his blade, the eye creature running free. Zaveri, still in shock, gets confronted by the xenomorph as she frantically runs for the ship, as it terrifyingly stalks her. This scene being an obvious homage to the original Alien movie and just an absolute piece of horrifying, terrifying, just cinematic genius. Zaveri manages to escape, sealing a door behind her. She turns, seeing the head engineer, the man revealing that his body has been taken over by the strange eye creature. Moro manages to avoid the xenomorph entering into this same room, confronting the now controlled engineer, the eye creature calling in the xenomorph as a fight breaks out with all of them. The xenomorph fighting the possessed engineer while Moro makes a run for it, Zaveri managing to come to as she frantically escapes, the engineer's body taking severe damage from the xenomorph, forcing the eye creature to leave. Here we get a replay of the scenes of episode 1 when the ship crash lands, as we see Moro seal himself into this AI room, while Zaveri bangs on the door, the new captain being brutally killed by the xenomorph as Moro enters into the impact chamber, and we know what happens from here. The ship ultimately crash lands in Prodigy City, and the events of the first 4 episodes take place. Episode 5 ending as we see Moro, now in the present, has gone to visit Yutani headquarters, speaking with the new Yutani, the granddaughter of the woman who took Moro in when he was a child. Moro declaring that this will only be solved by soldiers, Moro saying that they have to do this his way. Yutani saying to give this man whatever he wants, as episode 5 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Episode 6 opens back in the present, as we see Wendy in the lab, the camera panning over every creature in the lab in a very foreboding, foreshadowing shot, as we see the xenomorph eggs, the eye creature embedded in the body of the sheep, who we learned from episode 5 is insanely intelligent, the young xenomorph that was recently born, the creature already having grown much larger, as well as a strange nest on the ceiling of one of these chambers, these weird fly-like creatures residing inside. All the while, the voice of Boy Cavalier rings out as he reads a passage from Peter Pan, specifically about how Wendy in the Peter Pan story knew that one day she would have to grow up, as we watch Wendy, aka Marcy, communicate with the xenomorph. Again, this scene is packed to the brim with foreshadowing and deeper meaning. Cavalier's passage about Wendy and Peter Pan and her growing up very much mirroring the journey that Wendy, aka Marcy, is going through in this episode, how she is forced to grow up. Marcy, as we will see in this episode, even going so far as to ask herself the question, does she even want to be human? As well, we see some major foreshadowing for the events of the climax of this episode and the very unfortunate series of events that happen with Toodles, but we will cover that later in the video. Meanwhile, Joe and Kirsch are watching Wendy interact with the xenomorph. Joe asking Kirsch if Wendy is really safe. Kirsch being confused by the question, as physically she's completely safe, and as far as Kirsch is concerned, Wendy isn't even human, so mentally and emotionally, she's always going to be fine. Joe begins then probing for more information, wanting to know how her recharge process works and any maintenance that she would need, as Joe hopes that one day Wendy can leave and that he could take care of her, Joe throughout this episode planning on how to escape from the island with Wendy. Kirsch hitting Joe with what is possibly one of my favorite lines so far of this entire series.
One day she's gonna graduate, right, from this place, and when she does, she's gonna need someone to take care of her.
That's like an onion asking, how do I take care of a star?
Kirsch very much giving Joe a reality check that Wendy will never be allowed to leave. And if she does, she isn't just going to live a normal life as a normal person. As in his words, Wendy has the potential to invent faster-than-light technology and explore the stars for thousands of years. She is never going to live just a normal human life. But we can tell that Joe is desperate to get his sister back, and very much still views Wendy as a child, as the little girl that he grew up with. We change scenes over to the Sylvia couple, who are doing maintenance on Nibs after her pregnancy outburst and her intimidating encounter with Dame a few episodes prior. Cavalier's right-hand man orders the Sylvias to fix her, to erase her memory of the past week that has caused the malfunction, and to alter her personality to prevent any more traumatic or emotional outbursts in the future. Arthur pushes back, refusing to do this, refusing to change her personality and tamper with her humanity. To his shock, his wife Sylvia agrees to do it, however. Arthur then getting fired on the spot for disobeying a direct order. We flash back over to Joe and Wendy, who are talking about the alien specimens. Joe believing that it was a mistake to bring them here, as his outlook on these alien specimens are that they are just predators, animals who rely only on their base instincts, like food and survival. Joe having the classic human view, that we are better than most animals, simply because of our intellect and because of the societies that we have created. Wendy pushing back, saying that humans are no different to any other animal. We aren't better than any other animal just because we have intelligence and we can create societies and technology. And if anything, humans, because of our intelligence, are worse than our average animal, as we do not simply kill just to survive, just to eat, but we experiment and we play God, which I'm not gonna lie, is pretty hella based from Wendy. Wendy also believing that this baby xenomorph could possibly be a good creature, as she explains that Boy Cavalier has created a yes place on Neverland, where yes is the only answer, as yes opens the door to all possibilities. Joe trying to change the subject, telling her he's working on a way to get them out of there. Wendy responding, saying, what if she doesn't want to go? Alt J's Tessellate then begins to play in our ears, which is a banger song, by the way, as we switch scenes, seeing an arbitration meeting between Cavalier and Yutani, accompanied by Morrow to discuss the dispute over the crashed ship and the specimens. The outcome is to be decided by a third party, which represents the 5 major companies. Yutani puts forward her argument that the ship and its specimens belong to her, and that she will gladly pay a settlement for the damages to his city and all of the lives lost. Cavalier putting up an expert counter-argument as he hilariously outwits Yutani, as he convinces Yutani to pay him $20 billion in a settlement fee, agreeing to give back the specimens, but only after they are quarantined with him for 6 weeks, as is the law that has been established by the 5 companies. Yutani being forced to accept these terms publicly, as she later speaks with Morrow after the meeting. Morrow saying that he could possibly get a xenomorph by the end of the day with his recruited asset, aka Slightly. Morrow also putting forth another plan, to destabilize the Prodigy facility and then exfiltrate the assets in the chaos, to which Yutani agrees. We then get a rather tense scene between Morrow and Kirsch on the elevator, both of them making snide comments and threats at one another, foreshadowing what I think is a very likely face-off between the synthetic and the cyborg. Back on Netherland, we see Dame Sylvia going through with the memory wipe and personality change on Nibs. Nibs waking up in her room to see Wendy watching over her. The two girls talking when Wendy discovers that Nibs has no memory of saying that she was pregnant or the events on the crashed ship. Wendy realizing that either Dame or Arthur Sylvia must have done something to make her forget. We see Slightly alone in the woods, talking with Morrow, the boy becoming more and more desperate to complete his mission and save his mother, who Morrow is holding hostage. He is then interrupted by Smee, the best boy character, who just wants to hang out and play with his best friend, Slightly promising to hang out with him once he, in his words, finishes his stuff, the two boys hugging. We flash over to Joe, who is in his room, making a map of the facility, as he is very much still planning on escaping with Wendy. He is then interrupted by Slightly, who is being weird as hell. As if we remember, Slightly's plan is to get a facehugger to infect Joe and then deliver this body to Morrow. Slightly saying he wants to show Joe something, but it's a secret. And Joe is obviously very sussed out by this. They are then interrupted by one of Joe's old teammates, as they are going on patrol and need an extra man. Joe leaving and going with him to Slightly's disappointment. The team walk through the raining forest, Joe asking probing questions about how to potentially get off the island, learning that there is a boat dock on the island. His team members telling him to stop whatever he is planning, as it's not like Joe is being very subtle about him trying to escape with Wendy. Back in the lab, we see Wendy continuing to talk with the young xenomorph. Kirsch contacts Toodles telling him to take Curly with him and go take care of all the creatures in the lab. Toodles, wanting to impress Kirsch and be his favorite, decides to go alone, something that he will very much regret, as we watch him begin feeding the creatures. However, the feeding door for the fly creature is stuck, Toodles accidentally breaking it, pulling it off. He then decides to do something extremely stupid, Toodles unlocking the door, stepping inside the chamber, holding it open with his foot. The sheep, possessed by the eye creature next door, headbutts the glass, startling Toodles, who falls to the ground inside the chamber, the door closing, locking him inside. Again, we learned from the last episode, the flashback episode, just how smart this eye creature is, and how it seemingly is almost like the ringleader for the other alien specimens, as it very much seems to me like the eye creature is going to be the central downfall to all of Neverland. Toodles is now stuck inside the chamber with the flies, as in a horrifying scene we watch the fly creature spray him with some kind of acidic substance, as he collapses to the ground, his skin melting off as he dies. This scene was absolutely tense, horrifying, and extremely fucked up, and man did I love it. Over to Wendy, who is meeting with Dame Sylvia. Wendy asking her questions on what she did to Nibs. Dame trying to explain that what she did was ultimately to help Nibs, and she is just trying to protect all of the hybrids and care for them. Wendy telling Dame that she doesn't want to be people if this is what people do. Wendy repeating to Dame what Kirsch told her, that synths can get rid of all sadness, madness, and emotions, and see the world for how it really is. As again, we see Wendy struggling with her humanity, the fact that the hybrids very much straddle the line between human and machine. Dame telling her she needs to tell her what's wrong so she can help fix it. Wendy simply replying with this.
What if you're what's wrong?
Again, this scene very much kind of embodies the internal struggle between Wendy, the two sides that she has, her synthetic side and her human side. Wendy realizing the problem with humanity, the fact that our human nature, our human superiority complex, and our love of playing God makes us worse than many of the animals that exist on this planet. We then flash over to Arthur, who is packing his things, getting ready to leave. He is interrupted by Joe, who wants to know if Wendy is actually safe here on Neverland. Arthur looking over at the camera that is watching them, as he says of course they are safe, offering to show Joe the vitals of the hybrids on the computer monitor. Joe looking at the monitor where Arthur has written, "Take her and get her out," Arthur giving Joe the boat code. Arthur then showing Joe that he can turn off the hybrid trackers and audio monitors, as he does so. Joe realizing this is his chance to take Wendy and actually leave, as he quickly exits the room. Arthur then notices an error message on the monitor, that Toodles' tracker isn't connected, his last known location being at the secure lab. Of course, we know that this is because Toodle has been melted into parts, as Arthur then quickly rushes out to investigate. We move over to Slightly, who is outside of the secure lab, trying to psych himself up to complete the mission for Morrow. Meanwhile, we see that Kirsch is watching Slightly remotely on a monitor. Arthur then shows up at the lab, wanting to see what has happened to Toodles. Slightly realizing that his original plan can still work. He will just have to substitute Arthur instead of Joe. The two then enter the lab, where to Arthur's shock, he sees Toodles collapse on the ground. He opens the door to the specimen chamber, seeing the melted face of Toodles, as he attempts to pull him out. Slightly in the commotion, opening the chamber for the xenomorph eggs, as we watch the egg open in the presence of a human. Arthur looks over, seeing the door to the egg chamber open, as he hears the scurrying of a creature in the lab with him. What we know is the facehugger. He quickly rushes to the door, trying to leave, seeing Slightly on the other side, as he is now locked in. Arthur begging Slightly to let him out, but Slightly does nothing. Arthur attempts to call for help on the intercom when he is suddenly attacked by the facehugger, the creature attaching itself to his face, constricting his neck as Arthur collapses on the ground. All the while, Kirsch is watching this entire scene play out on the monitor, Boy Cavalier asking him if everything is alright. Kirsch, to our surprise, lying, saying that everything is fine. An interesting move, as we know that Kirsch has been aware of what is happening with Slightly and Morrow, but he has so far made no moves to stop it, and now he is lying to Cavalier. Kirsch's motives and endgame so far in this show are seemingly a complete mystery, a complete enigma, but we know that this synthetic is up to something. Slightly then rushes into the lab as he drags Arthur's body over to a vent, shoving it inside. The door to the fly's chamber is still open, as the creatures escape, flying towards Slightly, who barely manages to get inside the vent in time with Arthur. The camera then slowly begins to pan across all of the creatures in the lab and the dead Toodles, in a scene that very much mirrors the opening moments of the episode, the camera stopping on the sheep possessed by the eye creature, as episode 6 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Alien Earth Episode 7 opens with Slightly huddled in his room, moments after the climax of Episode 6, where we saw Slightly set up Arthur to be attacked by the facehugger, as he quickly dragged him away in a vent. We can see the mental toll being taken on Slightly here, as he is frantically trying to figure out how to get Arthur to Morrow on the beach. Smee then knocks at his door. Slightly tries to get him to leave, but he insists, as Smee pushes his way inside, seeing the body underneath Slightly's bed. Smee freaking out when he sees the creature attached to Arthur's face. Slightly quickly explains the blackmail situation with Morrow and his mother, as he begins begging his friend for help, lying, saying that Arthur will be alright. Morrow just wants the creature, as Smee reluctantly agrees to help him, the two boys dragging the body outside the room. Meanwhile, we see Kirsch investigating the clusterfuck situation in the lab and the melted body of Toodles, two soldiers rushing in, capturing the two escaped flies. Kirsch telling Boy Cavalier this wasn't an accident, as he shows in the tape, where we watch the eye creature inside of the sheep orchestrate the events that led to Toodles' death. Cavalier freaks out with excitement, realizing just how smart this eye creature is, as he orders the creature to be moved. Wendy then arrives on the scene, seeing the wreckage in front of her and the dead body of Toodles. She demands answers, as Boy Cavalier attempts to calm her down. Wendy realizing that they aren't safe here on the island, as she decides she is going to tell the others. The guards attempt to stop her, but she intimidates them by calling the now full-grown xenomorph in the cage. It's then Cavalier and Kirsch realize that the trackers for the hybrids have all been turned off. Joe goes and meets with Wendy in her room. Joe, having fully made his escape plan the previous episode, says it's time for them to leave. Wendy convincing Joe to try and save some of the other Lost Boys on their way out, as they are like siblings to her. Wendy goes and finds Nibs and Curly. Nibs is still upset about learning from Wendy that they wiped her memories. Curly is mad at Wendy for this situation, but promises not to tell on her, as she decides to stay on the island. Wendy and Joe then leave, taking Nibs with them, as Wendy walks over to the monitor, using her ability to manipulate electronics to free the xenomorph in the lab. As they leave, we see the creature burst free on the screen, killing everyone. Cavalier goes and confronts Dame about the trackers being turned off, as he thinks that this was a plan between her and her husband Arthur to steal the hybrids. Obviously, Dame doesn't know anything about this, and she denies everything, as a secure lab breach warning comes over the loudspeakers. We watch Slightly and Smee carry Arthur's bodies through the hallways, when they are stopped by Kirsch, Slightly telling him that Morrow has been talking to him and blackmailing him, but Kirsch says he's known the entire time, which we the audience have also known, as Kirsch points them to the elevator, telling them how to escape. So far, we don't know exactly what Kirsch's motivations or plans are, why he is helping Slightly and turning a blind eye, but this is all revealed later in this episode. We flash over to Joe, Nibs, and Wendy, who stumble upon a gravesite, the spot where all the children's bodies were buried after they completed the hybrid procedure. Smee and Slightly make their way through the jungle with Arthur, dodging and hiding from soldiers. However, when the coast is finally clear, they turn, seeing that Arthur's body has vanished. They are then jump scared by the body of the facehugger, when Arthur comes stumbling into the scene, dazed and confused, the man unable to remember the events in the lab. Of course, we know that the baby xenomorph has now been embedded inside of him, and it's just a matter of time until the creature comes bursting out through his stomach. The boys very poorly lie to Arthur, saying that there's been a gas leak and that has caused them to evacuate, and they must go to the beach, where his wife Dame is waiting for him. However, a little while later, Arthur starts to come to, realizing that the boys are lying to him, as again, they have the minds of children, so they are bad liars. Arthur, however, is compassionate, almost like a father figure to the boys. As he tells them whatever is going on, they will all figure it out together, as he takes their hands and they begin walking back towards the facility. Suddenly, though, Arthur doubles over in pain, falling to the ground, as the baby xenomorph comes bursting out of his stomach, slightly freaking out in anger, not being able to stop the creature and get it from Morrow. Smee is completely stunned at having seen the horrible death of Arthur, and his best friend slightly lying to him. Slightly not knowing what else to do, continues to drag Arthur's body to the meeting spot with Morrow, Smee coming with him. Curly, upset, goes to Dame Sylvia, who comforts her, Curly referring to Dame as Mom. Slightly and Smee make it to the rendezvous site with Morrow, as we see Morrow and his Yutani Strike Force team emerge from beneath the water. Morrow is displeased at seeing that Slightly has failed, his team taking the two boys at gunpoint as they begin making their way towards the Neverland facility. Cavalier is in his room with the eye specimen, as we learn that the grown xenomorph has escaped the facility. Cavalier is absolutely fascinated by this eye creature, wanting to test its intelligence. He asks it about the number pi, the creature correctly being able to identify the next few numbers in the pi sequence. Cavalier, laughing with joy at having found such a smart species of aliens, decides they must embed it inside a human, so he can try and talk with it, saying he knows just the person to use for this. Yeah, this definitely is not going to end well. Wendy, Joe, and Nibs are confronted by armed soldiers in the forest, Wendy calling the xenomorph who comes to their rescue, killing all of them, as she tells the creature to hide and follow them as they travel, Wendy truly becoming the xenomorph whisperer. We see a quick scene of the baby xenomorph being captured, as Morrow with Slightly and Smee makes their way into the facility. However, this was all a trap, set by Kirsch, as Morrow and his team are held up at gunpoint, Kirsch having captured the baby xenomorph. It being revealed that Kirsch was playing 3D chess this entire time, that he allowed Slightly to talk with Morrow so that he could lure him and his team to the island and set a trap for them. Wendy, Joe, and Nibs arrive at the boat docks. However, it is revealed that Joe's team of soldiers was waiting for them there so that they could detain them and take them back. One of the soldiers rips up Nibs' doll, Nibs breaking mentally, as she then rips the man's jaw off. Chaos breaks out, Wendy beating up some of the soldiers as she begins to call the xenomorph, but Joe stops her, Nibs grabbing one of Joe's friends as he breaks her neck, Joe picking up a rifle as he shoots Nibs with an electric beam, Nibs convulsing on the deck of the ship as she seemingly dies. Wendy turns to look at Joe, a look of anger and pain crossing her face, as she simply says,
What did you do?
as episode 7 of Alien Earth comes to an end. Alien Earth episode 8 opens as we see the lifeless body of Arthur washed up on the beach. The adult xenomorph coming into the scene, inspecting the body, this being a very clever and a little bit of foreshadowing for an event later on in this episode. We then see Dame Sylvia go and visit the children's graves, bringing flowers, as we watch the xenomorph prowl the jungle of the island. The scene slowly panning in from behind Dame's back, as she turns, in horror seeing the alien looming over her. Gunshots suddenly ring out, hitting the creature, as Hermit's military team comes and saves her, taking her back to the compound. We see the island is in a state of complete chaos, the xenomorph having killed many of the island's guards. The lab is in complete disarray from the events with Isaac and Slightly in the previous episode, Boy Cavalier having locked up all of the Lost Boys in a holding cell. We see that Nibs is still alive and okay after Joe was forced to shoot her in the previous episode. Morrow and Joe himself locked away together in their own separate cell. Cavalier as well is not acting like his normal self, the man's anger and emotion causing him to not think clearly and to act irrational. As it seems as well, he is refusing to take his medication, which we can presume regulates these emotions. Cavalier is advised to evacuate the island, which of course he doesn't do, the man's arrogance and ego causing him to act irrationally, as we see he is watching old tapes of the procedures when the Lost Boys were created. the horrifying eye alien watching Boy Cavalier from its cage the entire time. Over in the holding cells, the Lost Boys begin to talk, Curly not understanding why she is in the cells with them, as she is Boy's favorite. The other thinking that Curly must have snitched. Wendy explains that in the Peter Pan story, Wendy Darling is actually the favorite. That is until she grew up. Peter then kidnapping Wendy's daughter Jane. Yeah, they definitely left that part of the Peter Pan story out of the Disney movie. Wendy saying that they are all in the cell together because they can't be kids anymore. At the same time though, these people won't allow them to be adults. Nib saying they are almost like ghosts. Wendy asking the others what is it that ghosts do, to which Smee replies they haunt houses. Wendy saying that all this time they have been afraid of the grown-ups, but maybe now it's time that the grown-ups should be afraid of them. He menacingly looks into the camera. Cavalier watching all of this on the monitor as Wendy begins calling the xenomorph. Suddenly all the security monitors in Boy's office turn off, Wendy using her control over the network to do this. As Cavalier then radios Kirsch, the synth telling him not to be angry but to be smart, as we see that Cavalier is growing angrier and angrier, becoming more unhinged, as the communication with Kirsch begins to break up. Joe's team guides Dame back to her apartment, as they are preparing for exfiltration. Dame sits down in her room when all of a sudden her devices begin playing videos of all these children being interviewed before they underwent surgery. Wendy controlling the footage, seemingly almost mocking Dame for the role that she played in creating these synth hybrids. We then flash over to Joe and Morrow making a mocking comment about how Joe is now like him, part machine and part human, and how his company owns him. Joe's team continues to make their way to the compound, but comms are down, so they decide to rally in the armory, as suddenly the elevator behind them opens on its own, the team piling into it as it begins to move. Suddenly though, the elevator stops, a self-destruct warning coming over the loudspeaker, as a timer begins to click down, the team panicking and trying to escape. The scene then changes to Smee, who is playfully counting down in rhythm to the timer, as we see the team struggling to get out on the monitor in front of Wendy, as Wendy is again using her powers over the network to control this elevator and make all of this happen, as she stops the self-destruct sequence. She flips the camera over to Morrow in Joe's cell, Smee asking her if she is mad at him, Wendy feeling betrayed by her brother, betrayed that Joe shot Nibs. However, Smee comes to Joe's defense, saying it was only because Nibs killed someone, and that Joe, at the end of the day, is one of them. Back over in Joe and Morrow's cell, we see that Wendy unlocks the door. Morrow noticing this as he lures the guard near the door, kicking it open, knocking the guard down as he bashes him in with his locked-up robotic arm. Morrow grabbing a gun as he says he is going to burn this entire place to the ground. Joe running off to try to find Wendy. We move over seeing Kirsch working in the lab. Morrow in the background murking the two guards outside the door as the cyborg silently begins sneaking up behind the synthetic. Kirsch suddenly turns though, gun in hand, shooting at Morrow, the bullet ricocheting off his metallic arm, hitting one of the creature's containment pods. As the two men begin fighting one another, Morrow getting the better of Kirsch as he slams the synthetic down onto a table, breaking his back. Morrow telling him that man will always conquer machine, referencing the folk tale of John Henry and his hammer. Suddenly though, we hear the sound of breaking glass. Morrow turning, seeing that one of the creatures has escaped its containment pod. Kirsch taking this opportunity, tripping Morrow and then choking him out. Wendy having watched this entire thing play out on the cameras. Boy Cavalier then walks in with his guards, as we see the xenomorph enter the facility through a sewer tunnel. Cavalier then telling the Lost Boys a story, as Wendy snaps her fingers, the door to the cells opening. Cavalier's story is about himself, about how his father was a drunk, a horrible, angry man. But Cavalier, you see, was born a genius, and destined to rule the world, as long as his dad didn't kill him first. So the boy at age 6 built his first synthetic, a man he could use not only as his new father, but a figurehead to run his new company and empire. Cavalier using the synth as a child to kill his drunken father. Cavalier telling the Lost Boys that he owns them. They are all just floor models for his new product, immortality set at a low price, but they are just all messing this up. Cavalier in his sheer arrogance not realizing how much danger he really is in, as Nib pounces on his guard, killing him easily. As the Lost Boys in a horrifying scene slowly begin walking towards their creator, Wendy telling him to run, as the man flees. Wendy jokingly telling the others it's time for some hide and seek, telling Nibs to go and find Dane, Smee and Slightly to find Kirsch and the cyborg, and Curly to get the soldiers. Curly jokingly saying she wants to be called Jane. We flash over to Joe, who is in Wendy's room. Cavalier's right-hand man entering, telling Joe that Cavalier wants to talk with him in his office, and he has a proposal for him regarding his sister. Smee and Slightly go to the lab, Slightly telling Smee it's not their fault with what happened with Arthur, as the adults made them do a bad thing. We see the xenomorph is now in the compound, murking an entire set of guards. Dame is alone when we see Nibs enter in the room behind her. Dame turning in horror as Nibs gives her a terrifying smile. This scene being an awesome callback to the scene earlier with Dame and the xenomorph where she turned and the xenomorph met her face to face. This time, however, it's Nibs taking the role of the monster. In the lab, we see Kirsch crawling on the ground as Slightly and Smee enter. The boy tying up Kirsch as Slightly smashes Morrow in the face, knocking him out. Back over to Joe, who enters Cavalier's office, as we see the specimen cage is open. This being a trap set for Joe, as Cavalier had planned to let the eye creature take over Joe's body, as the creature rips itself from the sheep's body in a horrifying scene coming at Joe. Joe frantically scrambling away, hiding in the containment cage. The creature then entering in through the feeding area, as Joe quickly scrambles away in desperation, trying to hold this creature off, when suddenly he is saved by Wendy, who smacks it away. Cavalier's right-hand man then enters, knocking down both Joe and Wendy with surprising strength. Wendy again saving Joe as she faces off against the man. Just as the man goes to attack her, she holds up her hand, telling him to stop, with the man freezing in place when it is revealed that he was a machine the entire time, who, like all the other machines in this place, are on the mainframe, so Wendy can control him. The eye creature then quickly scurrying away out of the room through a hole in the ground. Joe and Wendy then have a heart-to-heart, Joe telling Wendy that she sounds like a child. Joe saying that life is complicated. Wendy saying that this is what powerless people say to make doing nothing okay. Wendy saying that she likes the aliens because they are honest, as she tells Joe it's time for them to leave. We then see a Cavalier running for safety, as he radios his guards telling them that whoever finds him will get millions of dollars. All the while, he is being hunted by the xenomorph. It charging Cavalier, running by him, killing off the remainder of these guards, as Wendy and Joe enter the scene, Joe punching Cavalier in the face. We see Joe's strike team then enter the lab, as we see in the background the strange plant-like creature scurrying across the wall unbeknownst to the strike team. The creature in a horrifying scene grabbing the strike team leader from the ceiling, the other screaming in horror as he can only watch his team member be killed. The man turning as he is then knocked out by Jane, aka Curly. We flash back over to Arthur's body on the beach, as we see the little eye creature emerge burrowing inside Arthur's head, his body rising. Meanwhile, Yutani's forces have arrived on the island in airships. In the compound, we see the Lost Boys have put Kirsch, Morrow, Dame, and Cavalier inside the holding cell. Dame trying to tell Wendy that she's sorry. Wendy telling her that no, she's not. She thinks that she is a good person who did good things. But in reality, all she did was put 6 children in the ground. Wendy tells Cavalier that he is not Peter Pan. Peter Pan was a boy who never grew up. But Cavalier was never a boy. He's always been a mean, angry little man who decided to hate everyone just like his father. As Wendy says, now it's time for the Lost Boys to rule, as Episode 8 of Alien Earth comes to an end. And yes, that was Alien Earth Season 1 in a nutshell. Everything that happened in all 8 episodes from the debut season of the Alien horror franchise series. Again, a show that, in my opinion, has been probably one of the best shows to come out in 2025. Alien Earth, though, I think is really a return to like what made the original Alien movie so good. A blend of like sci-fi, psychological horror mixed with some body horror, but also telling a real human story. In addition, it is just an awesome, sci-fi horror series with some insane scenes of body horror. So even if you didn't, capture all of these kind of deep story elements to Alien Earth, it's still extremely enjoyable. And again, is low-key, I think, one of the best shows, the best series to be released in 2025. As always, though, guys, with these videos, these are just my thoughts and opinions, so feel free to let me know yours in the comment section down below. What did you think of Alien Earth Season 1, and what was your favorite episode? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, guys, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to support me, and it really does go a long way in putting this video into the algorithm. If you did like this video, then want to check out some of my other content on screen now, and as always, I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, stay safe out there. Peace, love, Otto.